Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos a Uhuru África, este programa especial sobre la revolución de Haití. Hoy estamos aquí en Uhuru África, también estamos conectados con los alumnos del máster Panafricanismo, Black Power y Afrofeminismo de la Malcolm Garvey University.com y con Uhuru África y con el patrocinio especial de la Fundación Vida, Grupo Ecológico Verde. Mi nombre es Awin Fubea, presentador de este programa. Hoy estamos para hablar de un tema muy especial, la revolución de Haití. La independencia de Haití, ocurrida en 1804, y vamos a hablarla desde Cecil Fatiman, a Mackendal, a Bookman, Dessalines y también al mismo Toussaint Louverture. Es un acontecimiento histórico lo que fue la revolución de Haití, que comenzó con el levantamiento de un quilombo en Haití, de un grupo de esclavizados africanos que unieron sus fuerzas para luchar, para llegar al nivel más alto de organización que es el Estado, la República de Haití, que nació el 1 de enero de 1804. El movimiento panafricanista, como no puede ser otra forma, es heredera de esa gran revolución y por tanto hoy vamos a hablar de este tema de la revolución de Haití en este seminario con especialistas y gentes de un reconocido prestigio y conocimiento al respecto de lo que fue la revolución de Haití. El impacto que esto ha tenido entre nosotros y el que sigue teniendo a día de hoy todo lo que linda con la cuestión de la revolución de Haití. En primer lugar, para hablar de ello, tenemos a nuestros invitados. No sé si, Tony, puedes ponernos en pantalla con ellos para que yo pueda presentarlos. Entre ellos, algunos de nuestros invitados son activistas y también son académicos. En primer lugar, tenemos con nosotros al profesor Akinjelo Umoja, que acaba de levantar la mano, ahí le tenéis, Akinjelo Umoja. Y también tenemos a la doctora y profesora Bellina Bello, que está con nosotros también desde Haití. Paso a presentar primero a la profesora Bellina Belli, que es una de las personas que más ha venido trabajando la cuestión de Haití. Yo me siento muy honrado por tenerla aquí hoy. Okay, I was to introduce the people about who is you, who is we're going to talk today, and what is the question we're talking today. And I tell them that the people who connect with us in Madrid and 39's TDT, Teleca in Barcelona, the 28 of TDT, and the people who see on YouTube, and the student of the Malcolm Garvey University who have this question of Haiti, and the African and the Guinea Equatorial Women Association, who is part of, now they are concentrated to see about the sister, because everybody was asking me about Sister Bello, about the Dr. Akinjele. So first of all, we go into the question. Dr. Bellina Belli is academical historian, Pan-Africanist community activist. She lives in different parts of Africa, Liberia, Togo, Nigeria, etc. Sifon Fedasson Felicité. She is a professor at the State University of Haiti and author of the several books of Haiti. One of the books is about the Imperatrice, about the Pays Haiti. And she's with us here, Uhuru Africa, sister, Uhuru Africa, Dr. Bello. And Professor Akinjele is a Pan-African activist and writer. He's professor at the African American Studies at Georgia State University. He's founding member of the Malcolm X Garvey movement and NAPO, New African People Organization, and Quilombo Community School. She's author of the book We Will Shot Back. I don't know, Tony, ¿puedes mostrarnos los libros tanto de la profesora Belli como del profesor Akinjelo Umoja para los estudiantes y para la gente que está viéndonos? Well, we're gonna have the cover of the book for people want to look for this book, and the book of the Dr. Bello and the book of the Akinjele. Please, Tony, put up the cover of the book so everybody can see and what's going on with this. So we're gonna start the discussion. Yes, it's one, but we got it in for putting now. I think Tony will do that. So we're going to start it. And first of all, Dr. Bello, how you doing? Congratulations for independence of Haiti.
I am fine. Thank you very much.
Dr.
And
Akinyele, how you doing?
I'm doing well, my brother. Free the line.
Freeline, by any means necessary.
I say.
And we're going to start with Dr. Bello, but the first question is for both. Um, what is the IT revolution?
all right, the first thing I believe people should understand is that IT went through 312 years of fighting. They like to talk about a 14-year revolution, but those are the final battles. These are not, that's not the revolution. The revolution went on from 1492 when the Euro Christian, mostly Spaniards, came to the island, invaded the island, and slaughtered more than 90% of the natural population of that island. Between 1492 and 1503, they killed over 2.4 million people. Then they brought in the Africans starting in 1503. And the Africans fought on the African continent, on at sea, while on the boats, they were still fighting. When coming off the boat, they're fighting, and we never stopped fighting the Euro-Christian slavery system. But in IT, is that in 1803, 312 years later, we came to a absolutely unquestionable victory. And we forced, after fighting off and winning against the Spaniards, then in 1801, the British thought they would take the island over. We beat them up. They came with 40,000 men and they left 25,000 dead on the ground. And while they back off, and then the French doubled up, tripled up, quadrupled their troops to try to keep the island, and we beat them up. So we beat three Euro Christian armies, the Spanish, the British, and the French, in order to declare independence on January 1st, 1804. That
Yes.
is the essence of the revolution, of what went down on the revolution. It's very costly, life ways, and in all other ways. And while IT, as soon as IT became independent, the concept, we created the empire of freedom. They never like to talk about. They talk about the first republic, but the republic is not going to come until 1807. But in 1804, we created the empire of freedom, which put in their budget, on the fifth line of the budget, money to help those fighting for freedom. That's why when Miranda came to Haiti, when he was trying to fight for freedom in Ecuador in South America, he went to France. The French said they were going to help him. They put him in jail. The US said they were going to help him. They put him in jail. So he ran away again. And so he came to Haiti. And that's when he got boats, money, weapons, and people to go and continue his fight.
Good.
When Bolivar was fighting, same thing. Bolivar came to Haiti and he got boats, money, weapons, and people to continue the fight. So Haiti created the Empire of Freedom in 1804, ready and willing to support anyone fighting for freedom.
Good, Professor. This is very important. The question you introduced. I mean, Akinjale, uh, Dr. Bello talk about the empire of freedom. What that means in those days, and for Africans war in for example the US. We know that was one of the country with Spain, with English and French against IT revolution, against IT freedom. um, I want we go in the beginning, the question of the quilombo, the question of the Africans who escaped from slave?
Well, that's an important question, but going back to your initial question, we want to recognize and state that this revolution is one of the most significant events in world history. And one of the things I think is one of the travesties of the curriculums of empire is that is not recognized. As somebody who taught in the public school system in the United States, the Haitian Revolution is not mentioned at all, and so it's one of the most significant events. Why is it one of the most significant events? As Dr. Bello mentioned, in terms of its role in the liberation from Spanish colonialism in the Americas, is also the Greeks who were fighting against the Ottoman Empire reached out to revolutionary Haiti to get support in their fight against the Ottoman Empire. It's significant because France was so hurt economically from the loss of its most valuable colony that it had to sell 1/3 of the continental United States to the United States, right? And so it changes the course of world history. Not to mention the fact that inside of the United States, that it inspires revolt, insurrection, rebellion. So when you talk about in 1822, the Denmark-Vesey conspiracy, which was the largest attempt by Africans to take over territory and establish free territory, Haiti inspires that, right? The Denmark-Vesey at that time wrote letters to Haiti to try to get support for his insurrection there. If you look at in New Orleans in 1811, where you have actually the largest engagement, the battle of enslaved Africans against the white settlers, the white colonizers, they were inspired. Some of them actually were, some of the people who engaged in that uprising were actually Africans, enslaved Africans who have been brought to North America from Haiti. So it is very significant event in world history. How does it connect to this whole tradition of Africans who escaped from the plantations and formed their own warrior communities, which in Africa, West Central Africa, were called quilombos. Sometimes they're called maroons or cimarron. But that tradition is very important in the Haitian Revolution. There are periods of time in the revolution, as was mentioned by Sister Bello, that even before you have the armies and the generals that we recognize, it was the rebel resistant Quilombo communities who maintained the fight. And so the essence of that, and I would argue a lot of what we call Haitian culture emanates from those Africans who escaped and in the swamps, the woods, the forests, created this is new African, if you will, culture that maintains the fighting spirit of the Haitian people. Even today, when you see attempts by the colonizers, by the United Nations, by the French, the United States, the Canadians, to establish new neo-colonial governments, they're not successful because of the resistance of this people from below, that same fighting spirit. And I think it's also a travesty, as we talked about, a travesty in curriculum. It's a travesty on international solidarity movements today that don't recognize and support the fight of the people on the ground against these neo-colonial forces, as well as these colonial forces who try to destroy the revolutionary spirit that we were talking about, as well as to continue to rob, and exploit the people of Haiti?
Well, good. Bueno, bina Uhuru Africa. Makomina desde España. Bina vaya Angela Valana Bellina Bello. Ya Akinjelo Moya. Yine Bellina Bello Akobia na Haiti. Mbura Vombalo na Haiti. Maete. Evumo Makendal ba Tusen banga so mbura Nkobo. Amuna emu biabo mbura fot eferbalo na independencia y revolución de Haití. Esto filia Haití. Mana wana bumfube manyi mana vanyi muven Uhuru Africa. Bo se bayen bia Guinea Equatorial, la Senegal, la Mali, a Burkina Faso. Ni mayen febia Moyos, ni mayen febia Oman, ni mayen febia a Nigeria, Ghana. Bine mova Akiba Uhuru Africa. Well, we was connected with the people who speak Fang language in Africa to tell them that what we are doing today, who's the people we have here. It was things Dr. Bello and Sister Bello is here with us. Is coming from Haiti. I explain what the Haiti is in what they did them in that times for long time ago with Mackendal. Sister Bello, I want to ask you something that people need to know. Who is Mackendal, Francois Mackendal, and second one, the role of the women in the Haiti revolution, because in my book, 50 Years of Africans Women Struggling in Spain, I spoke on that question at the beginning, but it's not very developed like in the great context, because I know that you have many research, you talk too much about that, and you know about this question. Please go ahead, sister.
All right. The role of women, we have to understand, if we go back to Africa, if we go to a place like Dahomey, in Dahomey, since what the Euro-Christians calendar called the first century, Dahomey already had a men army and a female army. And the female army is the most important army. They don't have the same regulations. They do not function the same way. The men army can take prisoners. They could do all kinds of. Female army don't deal with that kind of stuff. They tell you they fight. Fighting is about life and death. I either win or I lose. So when we win the war, the battle, we do not take prisoners, male, of any kind. You just gonna die. That's it. So the female army is in Dahomey was already very well known, and so some of these women ended up being captured and taken to the colony of Saint Domingue. And one such woman, Agbaraya Toya became well known as the woman who raised a very important personality in Haiti's art street. And she did not raise him by chance and see how he's going to turn out. No, she raised him to become a liberator. She started training him when he was 4 and 5, spiritually, historically, militarily. Teach him also how to heal, because in the African concept, you cannot be a good fighter if you don't know how to be a good healer. The fighter and the healer has to work together. Both has to be present in the same person. So she trained him the way she was trained in Africa. And this man we came to know him as Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who brought Haiti to independence. So among the many women, there were many women involved, but one in particular was Marie-Jeanne. Marie-Jeanne had an army of 1,000 to 2,000 women, no male in her army. Most of the the various armies in Haiti were mixed armies. They would have female and male. They would have children and elders. But in Marie-Jeanne's army, it was very strict, exclusively women. and she would be the woman. She did not join the army of Dessalines, for example, but she would back up those fighting for freedom, ensure their security, identify where weapons are. Because another important thing about Haiti's revolution, Dessalines, for all the years of fighting, never bought a single gun. And that was an established policy. He says, no, we don't buy weapons from the cousins of our enemies. The enemy brings the weapon onto the island. We take our share. It brings it in for both of us.
Yes, yes.
Because if we buy weapons from their cousins, the cousin will tell them, well, first of all, will sell us the worst quality for the highest price. And then tell his cousins how many we've got. So we would lose anyhow. So the only way to fight and win is for them never to know what we've got when we get it, how much of it we've got. So that was an established policy with Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Macondal is an African. He spoke Arabic, he spoke English, he spoke Spanish. I'm not certain where exactly he came from, but he seems to be someone who had been well prepared to, as member of an elite in Africa. And when he came, was captured, brought into the slavery system, the Euro-Christian slavery system on the island, the colony of Saint-Domingue, Macondal taught our people how to use plants. His thing was that we're not gonna go fight with them with weapons, but as we do the cleaning, we do the cooking, we do everything. We can use the proper plants in the food to put them to sleep forever. Yes. So, yes. And Macondal was supposedly, according to the way the history has it, Macondal was killed 3 times. He was hung, and when they thought he was dead, he untied the knot and came and walked away. He was burnt. And the 3rd time, he was burnt and shot. So, and there are at least 20 some odd years of archery during those 3 those 3 murder, those 3 attempts to murder him. They got a lot of things done.
They said that I read that the Macondal was born in Angola. He was part of a royal family in Angola, that they said. But
yeah, some of the authors says that. Some of the authors say that.
Okay. That's the one of the point I want to deal with the Macondals that we're going with Akindele is that he was the first. First, quote unquote. He was one of the first to get this kind of army that Akindele said that it was the Maroons, Quilombo. He was the first guy to unite lumpen proletariat Africans in the mountain.
I'm skeptic. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I'm not sure about that because, there's reports when the Spanish first come to what they later call Hispaniola, that there's a period of time where they don't want to bring Africans because they report that the Africans they bring teach the indigenous people bad habits. In other words, they're fighting back and resisting. So I don't know if we know who was the first, to lead this resistance against. I think that might be hard for us to document.
Sebastian Lemba.
Yeah, I want to add that there's different memory of him on the African side as well as on the European side. On the African side, Macondal was deified as an ancestor, was considered a spirit we could call upon to continue to fight, right? And so Some reports even say that in spirit he advised Dessalines. On the other hand, the Europeans feared him. They start calling herbs macadals. You know what I mean? The herbs that they feared. So he certainly had an impact because he's remembered by us and he's remembered by them. He was remembered by them. But that the resistance, we would say it goes way back. I noticed that Mama Baina began her story in the 16th century of the fight. So we don't know those names. I don't know those names. They're nameless, Africans or names we don't remember. They had names, but names we don't remember from the Congo, from the Wolof, from certainly the people Dahomey that she mentioned. So we don't know how far that goes back. We don't know who tried to pull those forces together, or who did pull those forces together and link, particularly with the indigenous population. And then even after she says, after much of the indigenous population has been decimated.
Yes, that's question. Brother Kinjele was talking about that the European stocks that Africa was teaching bad things to indigenous people. One of the guys who was doing that, it was Sebastian Lemba. Sebastian Lemba, it was uniting indigenous people to suicide against Spanish people. And it was telling that in the part of a Spanish place, Santo Domingo, in 1517, that's what the time of Spanish people finally, because Sebastian Lemba he was using tropes of indigenous people, and the Spanish people finally killed him for that. So, what's the explanation the sister did about the women in the army is some kind of a strong thing in the history that the books doesn't explain that. Any books, any feminist congress or women congress that we never tell us that this kind of strong events happen in the history of liberation of the women's, not only African women in the world. So I think that points is very important to understand why the success of the Haiti revolution. Because you can understand how we did get this success if you don't understand what this was. Dr. Bello talk about the women. Yes.
Yeah, it is important for us to understand the role of women. And not just, we have to understand that we are working with materials that is generally written by liars, which have made it a scientific business to deform and disfigure the history of the world. So it's not just about IT, it's about the history of the world. For example, in the United States, I have come across at least 11 localities called Haiti, Hayti. All these localities have in common that they were basically, population is black. The population made attempt to free themselves, and the population earned for freedom and structured their lives according to their own their own imagination, their own perception of life. But if you Google IT in the US right now, you might find maybe one or two. You'll find the one in North Carolina, which has become famous since then for many reasons, but we won't go into. But generally, this kind of information is being, people shouldn't hear about it. And of course, in the US, they pronounce it Haiti. They don't say Haiti.
Mhm.
But so you have to get in depth into the story of those spaces before you can understand, hey, this is Haiti. And look, their story is not very different from what Haiti in the island did.
Mhm.
Very roughly, they did about the same thing. They make the same attempt. Excuse me. So we have to be very attentive because we are reading many times books that are written by obsessive liars who go about deforming the story. Simple thing. In the woman, when the Euro Christians first invaded Haiti, the island, the Arawak woman who was part of the leading, the crown, Anakaona, well, they hardly ever mention anything about this woman. But this woman, after they killed, the crown was made of 5 leaders, 1 female and 4 males. And it was the rule for them that the crown must always have men and women. It can never have 5 men, it can never have 5 women, but it can have 1, 4, 2, 3, any combination. Now, the 4 men were killed within 3 years of the invasion. But that woman, Anakaona, fought against the Euro Christians for 10 years. And in the end, she is taken to Santo Domingo. She is hung and burnt.
Mhm.
And there is very little written about her. But this woman had 10 years of history, lots of communication with the Euro Christians. Lots of, I found a letter from Ovando, one of the Spaniard governors, saying that he tried everything militarily. He can't get over. Even when she takes their weapons one night before, she
Mhm.
trained during the night, and the next morning she beat them up in the battle. So when you find things like that, and they have tons of information about them that we don't have. They have the Arawaks had libraries, many books written. They had an alphabet of 13 letters, but they always say these were savages who didn't know nothing. They lied and lied and lied about our street. So whenever we are reading, we must always keep, I say, 7 grains of salt in the mouth, so that whatever you're reading, you are analyzing and questioning it and not swallowing the information. So
Yes.
erasing women, the presence of women in the narrative, is one of their expertise. Expertise. When they took King in Dahomey, oh, his name escapes me right now. The last king in Dahomey,
Bahanzin.
Beanzin, right? Beanzin. When they took Beanzin, 2,000 warriors lined up because he decided he didn't want to fight anymore. So he went to the French against the will of his army, the female army. So 2,000 women lined up when, as they were taking Beelzebub and taking him to the boat, they picked up their dagger and stabbed themselves because their role was to protect the king, and the king decided to go to the enemy. So they felt they should not live anymore. They won't put that in the books. That we are people of our words. If we say that this is what I'm here for, then I will punish myself when what I'm here for is not accomplished. So we have a lot of work to do. The presence of women, the role of children. King Henry of Haiti sent his 9-year-old child, Francois, to go study in France. When the revolution started, Napoleon wrote to King Henry and told him, if you don't step out from that revolution, you will not see your child anymore. Henry, who would later become king, he was general at the time. Henry said to Napoleon, my wife is gorgeous and we will have many children. He did not submit. They killed the 10-year-old boy in France. People want to talk to us about democracy. They want to talk to us about fairness. They killed a 10-year-old boy who had nothing to do with nothing. And he's not the only one. I'm sure many of our children were slaughtered. Children that we sent to study were killed by these people in different situations. So we have to do the work of not just researching, but really analyzing, questioning, in-depth questioning of any information we come across.
Yes.
Because the superficial stuff is never what we need to know.
Yes. Well, what is the sister is talking about, the question of the so-called information, the so-called research. I remember when I was reading for newspaper. There was a leftist newspaper. I informed them that when Mobutu in the Congo expelled French, they bring professors. The white professor was expelled. They bring professor from Haiti to teach people in Congo. That is something that is everybody know, because it's in everywhere. Because there was black people who speak French, and everybody would say, "Where's these people come from?" People were asking them, "Where's it come from?" Those people just come from Haiti. But in that time, we didn't know that. We didn't know that there is a black people in Haiti who can teach us French and things like this. But now, I think one of the son of this family is one of the filmmakers. It's a famous filmmakers. I don't remember his name now, but I think it's one of the filmmakers.
Yes, he was raised in the Congo.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, he just. Yeah, right. He just. The Brutes. He has his latest film. Oh,
Lumumba. He made Lumumba film.
Right. He made Lumumba. Yes, he made a film about Lumumba. But his most recent film, he made it with Netflix, and something about the Brutes.
Right.
It's doing very well.
Things like this. If this question I told you about the contribution of Haiti in African education in the present, even cities like Libreville, the capital of Gabon, it was built by Africans who come back from slave. Yes, it's the capital of Gabon, Libreville. I have one of my friends in the Pan-African movement in Spain. His grandmothers come from Jamaica. It was the woman who talk about Christianity, things like this, And she came to Liberia and she walked from Liberia to Equatorial Guinea, spreading Christianity. And he died there, and then he went into the places now is Libreville with another people. They found this city, but when you go into the website and internet, you find Wikipedia Libreville. They told them it was built by French. They tell you the city was built by French. It was people who come from Liberia to Black Star Line, all these people. And my friend, his name is Marcelino Bonjale. He's the president of the Black Parliament in Spain. It's his family. It's the history of his family. He can tell you about how his grandmother come from Jamaica. Dr. Mary Cook. It was Christian women who come from Jamaica to Africa, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and finally Guinea. So I think the sister is true about what we read in media, what we read in the internet. They tell you that Libreville was founded by French, but it's true. It was people who were slaves who became free. They decided to stay in this place and found the place that they call Libreville and many other places in Equatorial Guinea that that they was finding by those people who was being back. Well, let's go.
And the filmmaker's name is Raoul Peck.
Raúl.
Exactly.
Yes, yes,
Exactly.
yes, yes, Freeland, good. Yes, yes. Bueno, estamos aquí, seguimos en Uhuru África Televisión con ese especial sobre Haití, hablando con la doctora Velo y con la doctora Kinjelu Moya, uno desde Atlanta, Estados Unidos, y la otra desde Haití, desde Puerto Príncipe. Estamos haciendo ese especial sobre la revolución de Haití, lo que sucedió el 1 de enero de 1804, y estamos aclarando los puntos sobre el tema. Así que ahora vamos a seguir sobre la importancia del vudú en la revolución de Haití. What's important has voodoo in the Haiti revolution? Because in the films, in the movie, in Hollywood, they show you like voodoo, like people who's killing, like zombies. Even in Africa itself, people show you like the voodoo, but what is the importance? What is the role of voodoo play?
Well, let's begin by saying this. The Euro Christians have slaughtered more than half the population of the continent of Africa in their attempt to impose their Christian faith. Prior to them, the Muslims slaughtered and kidnapped millions of Africans, castrated many men. The crimes that those two religions have made around the world, no one talks about it. No one evaluates the depth of those crimes. Now, when we talk about voodoo, voodoo has attacked no one, has slaughtered no one, castrated no amount of men or anything. What is voodoo? It is our own world view. We have a world view that says the sun is my mother. She is queen and she is my mother. And she feeds me. I have duty towards all life forms, the birds, the trees. I have a way to behave with each life form. And these life forms, since I have duties toward them, they have duties towards me. So that's why you might find us singing a song like, Si l'ennemi barre moi, feuille wa sauver moi. We would have song that would say, while at war, if the enemy was catching up with me, tree, I know that you will save me. So we have communication with every life form. We have a way of life. It's not in the revolution, and then out of the revolution is different. This is a life, a way of life. Before I will go to war, I will take certain baths with certain leaves that facilitate my agility, make me be able to do things faster, or be able to develop an ability to duck what you call bullets when they're shooting at me. That would make my skin so tough that even if you stab me, you wouldn't be able to penetrate my skin, because we have a relationship with every life form. So this is our way of life on a daily basis when we are not contaminated by Euro Christians or any other Euro form of mentality.
Can I also add?
Yeah, go ahead.
The term of voodoo is rooted in Ewe speaking people of West Africa. You commonly find them in Benin, Togo, parts of Ghana, and a significant amount, not the majority, but a significant amount of folks from that area of West Africa were brought to the island during the Middle Passage, and they would have a critical impact on the enslaved population, particularly the folk who were runaways, as I said, or quilombos, to use the term I prefer to use. And so they had an impact on how spirituality was practiced by African people. And one of the things I see in what's developed in Haiti today, which is different from maybe some other places, which I believe is beautiful, I believe is Pan-Africanist in and of itself, is in a Haitian voodoo community, you might have spiritualities from a variety of places in West and West Central Africa. As opposed to if you go to Cuba, a lot of times you'll see one religious house is based upon Yoruba, and another religious house is kind of based on people from Benin, and another religious house based upon the Congo, where it's more Pan-African. In fact, in Haitian voodoo, you'll see in many religious communities a salute for the nations, all the spiritual nations from West Africa. They believe contributed to voodoo. So I believe the practice is Pan-African, if you will, probably more than any other African religion, on the continent or in the diaspora. So I think it should be saluted on that basis. And of course, it played a very, very, very important role in the resistance, a very important role in resistance against the French and against the Spanish and other European colonizers, even to the point, and I know you're going to ask about Boy Caman later, but
yes,
it's not only assembly of people who wanted to resist and fight back and form this army you talked about, but it's also a religious ceremony, right? Where the spirits of the ancestors are evoked to play a role in our resistance, as well as there's a distinction between our spirituality, our deity, our spiritual world versus those of the colonizers. It's very clear that that's what's being called upon at that moment. So I think it's certainly to be celebrated. Now, Sister Bello, Dr. Bello mentioned how Euro-Christian religions have been used to demonize African people, and that still exists. I might could send you the link later on, but I wrote after the earthquake in 2010, and particularly after the cholera epidemic, some people who were Christian fundamentalists were actually lynching practitioners.
Yes,
actually lynching, just like the Ku Klux Klan lynched our people in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. So to me, it was like they're carrying on the practice that she mentioned earlier. And so it's really an anti-democratic practice, the way they assault the traditions of Africa. It must be noted too that a large part of the fight for democracy in Haiti, I think, was and even with that continuing, must be the recognition of our spirituality. Must be also the recognition of how our people speak. Of course, years earlier, I believe under President Aristide, there was recognition of voodoo as a religion that gave voodoo priests the same rights as Catholic priests in the country in terms of baptizing and certifying marriages and death. So that's a part of the fight for democracy today, for us to recognize that as whether you a voodoo practitioner or not, but to recognize that's a spirituality of our people, and it has played roles in healing folk and healing people mentally, spiritually, as well as in terms of their physical health. And it's something that should be employed today, even in this COVID-19. that all of our weapons must be assembled to the battle against whatever enemies our people might face. And so voodoo has historically played that role and should be allowed to play that role today.
I remember when I went to Georgia, they impacted to me in the temple in your garden, the garden of your home in Georgia.
You tell them about business now.
I was really impacted. It was a long time ago. It was 20 years ago.
Hey, we still got something going. And it's extended beyond me to my children and grandchildren.
you know, Sister Bello, it was a night. It was in the night. You saw me in the garden. When I look in the garden, I see the temple. I said, wow, let's back home.
Well, it is sad that we have been conditioned to think of plants and all the other life forms as being something separate from us.
Right.
Whereas we are part of the oneness of creation. But let me mention this. Today is January 10th, and there are major celebrations in Benin today.
Right.
It's the biggest Voodoo Day in Benin, every year on January 10th. So
my son-in-law is back there.
I see. Very good.
He's there for the National Day of Vodun and the Day of Remembering
yes.
in Benin. Yes.
Mm-hmm. You see, to me, the biggest loss we did over the centuries of continuously being under attack by others is this oneness of existence. You see, today we talk about voodoo should be allowed too, but nobody has to allow voodoo nothing, because it is part of me.
Mm-hmm.
As a teacher in the classroom, my understanding of voodoo will help me to understand my students and be able to transmit information better. If I go on the battlefield, the fact that my perception, my voodoo belief, and me are one, I will be able to be more efficient on the battlefield. If I go in the hospital, again, so it's not that we're going to use voodoo here and we're not using voodoo there. We would have better rulers if our rulers didn't have this sick mind of looking for Jesus to help save the country.
Yes.
If they understood that voodoo, with their understanding, their own perception of the world view, they can understand better the need of the population. Toussaint Louverture, in fact, when you study him well, you'll understand that Toussaint is a living legba. Legba is in voodoo the principle of that which opens the way for things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you study Toussaint, everything about him, the fact that he spoke all the languages, he spoke Latin, Spanish, French, English, that's typical Legba behavior. His size, the way he looked, everything about him. Now, some of us in our ignorance, so-called intellectuals, we will say things like, oh, if Toussaint had given us independence, it would have been better. Toussaint could never, even in a million years, give you independence. Because the primary principle of his life structure is to open the way for independence to happen, not to bring it to you. And then when you study a man like Dessalines, then you say, now that's the Ogu personality. Ogu is whenever you have an objective, Ogu knows how to take you to accomplishment. And that's what Dessalines is. But when we don't understand these things from our own world view, we make lots of mistakes. We misunderstand the people that we are studying. And we're asking them to do things that they're not qualified to do. So, all this to say what? The biggest problem with us is that we no longer have our own worldview to function with. So
Yes.
I will say I'm a voodoo, and then I will quote uh, Shakespeare. I will quote some nonsense from something that has nothing to do with my own worldview. See, when I hear an intelligent African American saying things like they have a great admiration for Benjamin Franklin, who said that every man has the right to be happy, blah, 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 etc. But this man, he wrote this while looking out in his window with his 700 and something slaves toiling for his wealth. So, what do I care that he says that every man had the right to be happy? Obviously, he didn't believe that. He wrote one thing and his behavior was something else, which is generally what it is with you, a Christian. They say don't judge, and they judge everything. They say, oh, love your neighbor like yourself. They don't love nobody. They go about slaughtering people. But we are often blind to these obvious behaviors, and sometimes we emulate them. So the big effort we must do is be ourselves. That's why at Fondation Félicité, our most important thing is to teach, learn to be yourself, learn to know yourself so you can love yourself, and then you will be who you are
No.
and not try to be
No.
your enemy.
Okay, sister. Well, the question your sister was talking about is really when you go into West Africa, maybe the sister know that better than me, but in my country where I was born in Equatorial Guinea, you see what the people is ill, people don't go to the hospital first. They go to look for Sister Bello. And then finally people go into hospital. But those elite, those who rule the country, they are totally whites. Black people with the white mentality, they believe in Shakespeare and Cervantes, and they repeat all these Latin expression, and understand. So there is contradiction what Akinjele talk about democracy. There's contradiction between the majority of the people who live one reality, these small people who come from European university and impose the majority to believe in all these kind of aspect of reality. And because people tell you that Haiti have an air squads because they are devils. People tell you that. people tell you that. Black people, Africans people who born in Africa, people who speak Fang like me, they speak Bubi, they speak, they told you that. Because we have this invasion of the Protestant religion sectors in Africa, that they come in with thousands of sectors. We have Muslim Wahhabistas from Saudi Arabia. They come too. So that's what the sister was telling the both. This Protestant group with support Donald Trump, they support Bolsonaro, this group. They come to Africa, they say the people, first of all, you must to burn all your temples. You must to destroy all your temples, and then we will recognize you like Christian, like human being, like civilized or integrate, So that is something that's still going on. I think now is worse than in the past, because now the government of Republic of Santo Domingo, they passed
A law?
a law against Haiti people, and he said the High Constitutional in Santo Domingo said that because Haiti people is against God, because Haiti people is devil, because all these things about the black people, Africans like devils, like people who are trying to make blood, to destroy, all these things. But before, they didn't attempt to tell that. But now they tell it openly. They talk that openly. That Haiti must to be reconquered by European countries. Haiti cannot be free. Haiti must to be under somebody. So that is openly. And now it's not white people, it's the black people who are talking on that. I don't know, before we go into the next point, if you can say briefly, Akinjele, about this process of the recolonization of the black mind.
Actually, those people who talk that way are not, they're not black people. They're not, I'm not even sure they're people.
Mm-hmm.
They are mouthpieces who repeat whatever the master tells them to. Even if they show big structures or they say the parliament is going to vote, blah, 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 but the vote is made based on who's paying for them to vote a certain way. It has nothing to do with firm belief in anything. So I am not, I don't even worry about these non people's mouthpieces just yakking. What is most important to me is that we regain our own knowledge of self and behave according to our own worldview. And once we do that, the war is still on. The same way we won in 1803, we can win on every level today if we adjust ourselves. The problem is that we are not ourselves. Every time a person is saying, I'm a Protestant, I'm a Catholic, I'm a this, you're not yourself. So that person is somebody who has tremendous need. But let me say this: being you is the biggest weapon you can have to defend yourself. If you're not clear on who you are, if you're not clear on what looks like you, if you are not clear that you and the divine is one, then there isn't very much anybody can do to help you until you can help yourself to come to understand that the divine lives in you and you and the divine is one. Every time you're looking for something other than yourself as divine, you are sick. You need help.
Well, I kind of take a different perspective. Mm-hmm. I respect that. I certainly believe that knowledge of self is very important and essential, and that one knows and will, for one to achieve their destiny. I think the issue is, though, that we live in a world where there are competing forces. And I'm reminded, one of my teachers taught me, one of my spiritual teachers actually told me, is that the law of the universe is not peace, it's conflict. And we live in a situation where we have forces that are battling for us. I'm talking about broader than what we're talking about. And we have forces that are fighting against us. So when we talk about someone knowing who they are, they're battling with, on one hand, the media. They're battling with on the other hand, the educational system. And they're battling with the ideologies that come from forces that are anti-African, anti-Black. And so it's a battle between those two forces. And we have to do everything we can in this battle to challenge those forces. So when we talk about the individual person and the individual child growing up, they're being confronted with all these forces. So the the embrace of one's culture and one's traditions it's a challenge. It's not a simple thing to come about. It's a struggle. So we have to engage in that struggle, which is why we write articles, which is why we create where I live, we create academic institutions that we control. We create rites of passage programs for our children. I'm also reminded by the book 2000 Seasons. And in 2000 Seasons, you have a people who are faced with the enslavers. I'm talking about a people in West Africa during, we'll say, the 18th century. And they're confronted with the enslavers, right? And they free themselves from the enslavers, and they have a choice to make. Do they go back and live with the king who sold them into captivity? And that's a problem because they can meet the same fate. Do they keep themselves isolated from that king and create their own community? And they say, yeah, but their ancestors had done that once before, and the power of that, not only the king but the European colonizers they had aligned themselves with, eventually came for them. And they said, well, we must keep ourselves. The third option was to keep themselves isolated, but to continue to fight. To continue to fight against that enemy until you destroy the power of that king as well as these European colonizers. So when we look at the power of that king, we look at those of our people who work in their interests today. And we got to challenge them. We got to and confront and destroy that system, or we will never be free. So I would say we got to learn who we are, but we also have to engage in a combat to disrupt that system, and we got to fight on a daily basis. Even those of us who believe that we have regained our minds, it's a daily battle because you're confronted with stuff all the time. So I don't see it as a simple question. I see it as a one of challenge that we have to engage in on a daily basis, all the time, and in community, because we're not individuals, right? We can only be our African selves in community and with other like-minded people who are also engaging in this struggle to not only regain our African minds, but to regain our African selves, So yeah, I see it in that context.
So I think this question of individuality, this question of the community, this kind of discussion, maybe Professor Akinjele mentioned that before. Let's go with Professor Bello about what's happened that extraordinary night in Bos Cayman. That I see different films that represented the people was there, like murders, like voodoo, like things like But what's happened that night in Bos Cayman? Because in some books it tells us it's the beginning of the revolution. Akinjele said that it was a religious ceremony. At the same time, it was a political assembly. And but I want to know, people who has listened, what's really happened. What is the significance of these events or this historical day? I tell you that the last ambassador of Haiti in Spain, she disagreed. We celebrate that night because we invite her to participate in that event in August. The woman said that this is a bad day. They kill many people. It was against Christianity and blah, 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 blah. And she refused to participate. She refused to come. But Excellency Alfonso Rodriguez, other ambassador of Haiti before her, she used to come, she used to participate. So we have these two kind of attitude in front of this date. So go ahead, my sister.
All right. Well, it's not very complicated. As I said before, people with a enemy mindset are enemy. Doesn't make any difference what they look like.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to stop evaluating people on appearances. So what happened, as far as my research has demonstrated, we did what I understand to be a Congress. Because once you have a political objective, like becoming free, then only a Congress can bring you to resolve what is it, how you want to go. So the question was what for that night? This thing is organized by Cecile Fatiman, a woman in her 70s, who spent 4 years organizing a less than 1 hour meeting. 4 years of organization for a less than 1 hour meeting. And the meeting was, as it usually is in our worldview, it would start when the moon was in such and such position and must end when the moon reaches this particular position. So no more than that. And all of those who came are people who took their lives in their hands. Because if you are found to have snuck out of the plantation to participate in a meeting that is questioning how do we do so our children and our grandchildren do not suffer the misery that we are living now? How do we stop that? That's the question. No debate about this, that, and the other. Only one question to answer. What do we do so that our children and our grandchildren do not suffer what we're living right now? And sure enough, she planned it on the length of the island. She had programmed for 18 of them to take place the same night, same moment, with no TV, no
Instagram.
computer, no Instagram, no telephone, no cell phone, no nothing. She programmed
TikTok.
18 meetings one night. And 6 of them were aborted. 12 of them took place. And at the end, they all agreed there is only one way: we have to use force. Some people contested, saying that, but these people have weapons, they have boats, they have everything, we have nothing. And one of the answers came back saying, when the elephant fights against the ant, who wins? The answer is the ant wins. Because the ant knows how tiny it is. And the ant knows how huge is the elephant. And so the ant properly evaluate how many millions of ants are necessary to attack one elephant. Whereas the elephant, so proud of himself, does not even, he just see these annoying things there, doesn't make any plan for that. So that's the mentality with which we looked at the structure that we were about to bring down. So in August 14, 1791, in the middle of the night, we had this Congress, and we agreed that we would bring this thing down because we don't want our children and our grandchildren to continue to live in the misery that we're living here. One of the questions that came up was, but how are we going to do for this or for that? It says, every tool is a weapon. You're sitting on that stone right now, it's a tool. But if you are attacked, the stone becomes your weapon. The hat becomes your weapon. The pen becomes your weapon. Every tool is a weapon. So that's a totally different mindset that our people left this meeting with. So, and we would let you know. We will start on the same night, and we'll let everybody know which night. So sure enough, she took a week for the information to go back and forth, so we know that everybody had agreed that we were going to fight. And ultimately, Bookman Duty took the head of the strategy planning, the tactic training as to how we were going to fight. Those who are working in the sugarcane, here's what you're going to have to do. Those who are working in the house, here's what you're going to do. Those who have access to matches, to fire, to water, everything is a weapon, and we're going to use
Facebook.
Every... Right. The revolution will take place on Facebook tomorrow night. Right. Now we have all of this in our hands, but we don't have the right mindset. That's the problem. We have everything to do what has to be done. We don't have the right mindset. That's why one must be yourself. Everyone must be working as I work to become myself. You working to become yourself. He's working to become himself. Then the three of us, communication between us becomes easy. We don't have to say everything. There are things that should not be said on this platform, but yet we need to say them. We'll find a way to say it for each one of us to understand it without risking our lives, because we do have enemies everywhere in every structure. We must be aware when you have the right mindset and you know who you are, you know you have enemies everywhere. So there are things that you're not going to say, there are things you're not going to do, because you must protect yourself and your community.
Yes. Kinjali, Bookman Duty. Go ahead with this extraordinary guy and complete what the sister talked about that assembly. What's happened, because we know that we didn't have Instagram in that time. We have Bookman Duty. Because
Exactly.
you know something. We was discussing yesterday. I want to approach this one to salute my comrade in French from Global African Congress, Judy, Glenn, all the people who are put me in contact with Sister Dr. Bello and Sister Bello, and because yesterday we was discussing that with my sister from Brazil, the question of technology. But black people need technology. I said, but black people make the pyramids. Black people make the Haiti revolution. So, what kind of technology are you talking about? What we need to, what the sister said, be yourself. So, it means that before you get internet, before you get Facebook, you must be yourself first. Because Facebook not gonna teach you who you are. So, Akinjele, go ahead with this question of Bookman.
Bookman, they say was born somewhere else. I believe
Jamaica.
I was
He
going to
came
say
from Jamaica.
Yes, if I could continue. Had come to Haiti from Jamaica. Was
so he born in slavery.
He was born
Yes.
in captivity.
In captivity.
He was born in captivity. Yes, and then this meeting that was called by Cecile Fatiman, he took a very vocal role, and it is said that he challenges the folks assembly. And here's one interpretation of what he said: "Good God, who created the sun, which shines on us from above, who rouses the sea and makes the thunder rumble. Listen, God, though hidden in a cloud, watches over us. The God of the white man, calls forth crime. But our God, who wills good works, our God who is good, commands us to vengeance. He will direct our arms and help us. Throw away the likeness of the white man's God, who has brought us to tears, and listen to liberty, which speaks in our hearts." So he challenges people to invoke the spirits of their ancestors. Many of them were African born, right, at that time. And of course, because of the life expectancy of Africans there. They would bring them in, kill them, work them to death, and then bring in more. I think the life expectancy was like 6 years. And so many of them were African born, and they remembered the traditions of their ancestors, and that was called upon to be a force. Somewhat after the uprising, the insurrection, he was assassinated by one of our own, So, but he was
That's
certainly
not so.
Oh, that's not so. He
No,
was
he was
killed by one of them.
decapitated by the Euro Christians. He was decapitated, his head placed on a pole to threaten us, and with a sign saying "Bookman, the chief of the insurgent." So he was
So
killed by.
I guess we're relying on different accounts, but he was certainly killed early in the engagement of the.
Excuse me. Let me say this. During the 3 months that Bookman ran the show, the entire colony came to a halt. All industrial, all export, everything came to a halt. These people were living in absolute fear. More than 2/3 of the entire colony was in standstill mode. So we have to be, that's where I say it's very important how we look at this thing. When the information, even when, So in 3 months, what he accomplished is incredible. We must not take that away.
That is agreed. I wasn't saying that, but what I was actually pointing to was one of the things you were supporting. One of the things that we do have those amongst us who don't mean us any good. But certainly that resistance that was waged during that time had a significant impact on destroying the infrastructure of what the colonizers were doing at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And one thing that is that as they put the sign saying Bookman, the chief of insurgent, and every time one of us would go by, some of us would give him a salute and say, "Don't worry, we'll continue." Whereas this head was put there to put fear in us so we would be afraid to fight.
That certainly was part of their thing of warfare they would do during that time in terms of psychological warfare. It was done there, was done in Louisiana to decapitate the heads of the resistors and place them on planks. Even Louisiana, we remember the Quilombo rebel Sao Tome, whose head was decapitated, but also Africans oftentimes during resistance that would happen to us. Then again, we would cut their heads off too in response.
Hey, listen, you at war?
Yeah,
Not to hesitate. In fact, one thing I like to remember about Dessalines, during the fight came up to the place and he found that the French had hung 500 of our soldiers. So Dessalines says, "Okay, in 24 hours, I want 500 French soldiers over here."
Right.
So in the same spot, they went and got 500, hung the 500 French soldiers, and then he said, "Add 2 for good measure, so they know we could do better than them."
Yeah, sometimes it's tit for tat on the battlefield.
So finally, Bookman was killed it was decapitated and killed 3 months after the beginning of the revolution.
Yeah, it was early on.
Yes.
Okay. So
it's early on in the fight.
So he was the leader. He was elected that night as the commander in chief of this insurrection.
I don't know that he was elected, or if he simply, his inner self, his divine self chose him to do what had to be done. And he accomplished his mission. And then the next person rose up, which is a woman, Dieu donne, who took over to continue the fight. She carried it for another 6 months.
You know that's as Sister Bello mentioned an initiator. Even though he's not there when the flag is raised, he plays a critical role at that moment, right? And so, you have to elevate him for that reason. I mean, somebody has to light the match, and so he certainly plays that role.
There's one element I like to bring. When he was sold from Jamaica, it was as punishment to his mother, who had, as they said, revolutionary tendencies. So he was her only child. So they sold the child away to sort of, put her in her place.
Punishment.
Right.
They call it in the fan language, mbeamofulu, bad costume, malas costumbres. People who real old time is looking how to kill a slave master. They don't put it out. Go, sell him to Haiti. And even Bookman, it was the seller that it was he know to read. He reading books. That is it.
Yeah, right. He had a Quran, because they seem to be Muslims, his mom and him.
Yes.
So when he when he was sent to Saint-Domingue, when they tried to take the book away from him, he had a tiny little Quran tied to his waistline. And when they noticed that, they asked him to give it up. He refused. He was 13, around 13, 14 at that time. And so they took fire. They burned the book on him. Of course, burned his entire side. So, and then to mock him, they named him Bookman. Now, down the road, he is bought by a woman called Miss Duty. So he becomes Bookman Duty.
Yeah.
But you see, even though the wicked Euro-Christian, they were thinking in terms of mocking and this and that, but they don't understand. Life has greater power. So here is this person who, under those conditions, is named Bookman Duty. So the man of the book of the duty, and whose speech in 1791 is going to become sort of a book to all of us. While the Code Noir says we are not people, we are things. We can be bought and sold and cut up and killed and, doesn't matter. Well, Bookman's speech says, the God who creates everything is your Father. So he reminds us of our divine identity. This man who's called Bookman Duty. And he reminds us that the divine wants us to fight for our freedom. And he's going to spark the last leg of the battle. So our duty becomes clear thanks to this person who is mockingly named Bookman. But words out of his mouth become our guidance. So those are the things we must pay attention to. In our proper mindset, there is no chance, there is no hazard. Everything has meaning. Every African name has meaning. So even if you name your child in a foreign language, usually you would give a meaning to the name. And every name does have meaning. So, with Bookman Duty, once we understand, he is the word of the revolution. He set the rules. And look at the last sentence. He says, listen to your heart. That's where it will tell you what to do about freedom. That's not an exact but basically, that it is in you. So who's going to be the chief? We don't care who's going to be the chief. Listen to your heart. Your heart will tell you how to behave and go towards freedom.
I remember when I read the first time in 2003, the first time I read the book of Black Jacobins of
C.L.R. James.
C.L. James, who does the translation make to Spanish. You understand that the Spanish is the largest language of Africans, but the book of C.L. James was translated in 2004. 71 years after they published the book, people reading in Spanish in 2004. I remember when I read that statement that Kinjele, you talk in the sister just talk now, it was impacted me. This statement impacted to me. It's very impacted.
Right.
Because I said, wow, this guy is like Dennis Rodman and Isaiah Thomas in the Detroit and the Pistons, when they play basketball against Los Angeles Lakers, they have the same vision. They have the same, they don't accept the rules of oppressors. They even not only political rules, that theological rules. They have their own theological vision. They have some what they call they have some inspiration in their own kind of religious or spirituality. So this is something that impacted to me. That when the C.L. James put this statement in his book.
There's one other spiritual aspect which I think is important for African warfare, was they made a pact. And when we think about assemblies today, it's not necessarily a pact or an oath that people take to continue to fight. And so it's a pact of secrecy, it's a pact of solidarity. And so, and I think of other warriors or rebels or resistors, even in the United States. The Deacons of Defense, they took an oath. Some elements of the Black Liberation Army, Black Panther Party took an oath, a pact. So it's something that's sacred. Theirs was a blood oath, and it's very important to cite that part of the psychological and spiritual resistance that they engaged in at that moment.
Okay, we have a few minutes to have 2 points to finish this conversation, and we are today celebrating Haiti revolution, Haiti independence, and today we are talking from Madrid. I'm Abuim Fubea. I'm talking with Professor Akinjele from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm talking with Dr. Bello. She's in Haiti in Port-Principe, and she's a professor at the Haiti State University, and she's one of activists for the foundation and for Haiti freedom in the Haiti education system. So we are going to another point that I think is very important to understand this question is the so-called internationalism. Is that normally Black people ask you, hey, Abui, you are in contact with other people. Women Africa must be internationalized. But when you go to Haiti revolution, you see that there was always international revolution. Haiti was always supporting other people. So there's nothing new for Africans to Pan-Africans movement to get alliance. When Marcus Garvey asked alliance was supported by Sandino. It was support Ho Chi Minh. It's not new. It's the same thing with Dessalines, all these people. The sister talk about Miranda, but Bolivar, San Martin, Higgins, all these so-called revolutionaries who was fighting against Spain, it was fed and supported by Haiti. But in Spain's education system, that's never appeared. In Colombia, never appeared. In Chile, never appeared. In Peru, never appeared. So you need to to understand that and to know that, I remember when I have an opportunity to talk with President Chavez in the day where I asked him about this one. I said, and he used to like calling black man, negro. What's going on with this IT revolution? This. And he told me that, yes, Bolivar have some mistake. I said, what mistake he has? He didn't get this, I can just say, agreement, because Haiti government tell him, we're going to support you, but you must free Africans in all these places in America Latina. And he didn't do that. That don't say the Chavez say he has a mistake. Error in Spanish. Mistake. So, but the people in the audience didn't understand what he's talking about, because he said he had a mistake. But I understand because all these white supremacy tendency to tell Africans that they must learn to get friends, they must learn this. And when you read Haiti Revolution, when you know that, you see all these people talking about Markendal, Bookman, all this. There was contact with other people in other place, and they were supporting them. They was giving, remember that time Spain was a big empire. It was not small things that you are fighting against Spain. And Bolivar and San Martin and Higgins have all these people. Even in Argentina, San Martin take 25,000 African soldiers to go to fight against Spain. But now is when those people, the names appear in some kind of official statement or things like this. No, let's go with that question of internationalism in this question of IT revolution, because that point is very important to understand what's happened today with Haiti and why many groups are silenced when they kill IT president or something like this. People are silenced. People don't know that this happened today is the same thing happened in other place in the past. Go ahead.
Excuse me, very true. But let's look at some of the okay. So IT becomes the independent black nation in the America. Okay. In an American continent where everybody is under slavery. Every one of our people are under captivity, whether French, British, or Spaniards captivity or Portuguese captivity, but captivity everywhere. And IT is the exception. IT becomes free. Now, when some of the countries start to become free with the help from IT, when they decide to create, for example, the OAU, IT worked hard in doing the papers and this, that, and the United States said they didn't want to be part of it. Mm-hmm. When everything was ready and they set a date for the opening of the OAU, the US came in, paid everybody, and asked only one condition. What do you think it was?
Haití no participa.
Exactly.
Haití no tiene que participar.
Okay. Exactly. So, and this is something that was repeated so many times in our history that, no. But more importantly, when Nat Turner was arrested in Georgia after making his attempt in August to free his people, during the trial, the judge asked Nat Turner, "Who is your ruler?" And Nat Turner says, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. So they stopped the trial to go and find this Dessalines, arrest him. And then the judge and them are going to learn that Dessalines died in 1806. So Nat Turner is talking nonsense. So they come back to the trial and they ask him again, "Who is your ruler?" Emperor Jean-Jacques Dessalines of Haiti. So the judge said, "But this man's been dead since 1806. And Turner replied, "But his spirit guides me." Mm-hmm. most of us don't even take that seriously. We don't think about it. But then after reading this, I went back into the Turner files and tried to look at, I see so many dates he would take. We had August 14, 1791. Go look at which date in August Nat Turner begins. Look at some of the techniques that he used. If you know enough about Dessalines and you know enough about Turner's functioning, then you will see how this sentence starts to begin to materialize in front of your eyes. His spirit guides me. We are thinking and out of our own mind. In our own mind, there is no difference between the spirit and the body. There's always a spirit to keep a body alive. If there's no spirit in the body, then the body is a cadaver. Okay, but international, Haiti sent help to Guadeloupe. The Guadeloupeans, with the Haitian help, soldiers, etc., Guadeloupeans held the French at bay for nearly 7 months. The French nearly lost. That's why till today, Martinique and Guadeloupe have two different attitudes. Because the people from Guadeloupe, they know there was a time, even for a short time, they had some sort of freedom from France. So they have a different attitude. Haiti, when Greece was into famine, heavy famine, Haiti sent tons of coffee to the Greece, and told the government, sell this coffee and feed your people. When the Belgians were fighting, Haiti sent help to them. During World War, what these people call World War, it's their European wars, but anyway, World War II, Haiti had 4 planes. It sent 2 of its planes to go fight the Kaiser. So Haiti has never been out of the world, but the world has always turned their back on Haiti. From the minute we became independent in 1804, for 60 years, not a single country recognized Haiti's independence. No one. But that didn't stop Haiti from doing what she had to do. And it didn't stop Haiti from helping everyone who was fighting for freedom whenever she could. Until this day, it's true. The World Health Organization is busy studying today in Haiti why we are not catching this disease that everybody else has in such large numbers. And they're still studying it, trying to figure out why. But actually, knowing them, I know they're trying to figure out how to give it to us. Yes. But till now, we don't take this, we don't take that, but we have our teas, we have our fruits, we eat lots of pepper and lots of red onions, lots of lime. So if you know what's good for you, you make sure you add those things to your meal so you can protect yourself.
So if I may answer that question also, I think internationalism, and I think a good history was given, and we mentioned some of it before, in terms of Haiti's solidarity with people around the globe of oppressed people fighting against their oppressors. But I don't think that support has been reciprocated. And it's not being reciprocated today. I mean, we can go back to the coup in 2004, where President Aristide was kidnapped and banished and taken to Central Africa. And then when a delegation came with Maxine Waters and others to try to that got him out of there when he was trying to come to Jamaica to get political asylum. Condoleezza Rice went and threatened the Jamaican government, and Aristide was given refuge in South Africa. When I visited Haiti in 2007 and 2010, even after the earthquake, I saw poor people demanding his return, demanding his return to their country. But it was opposed by many. He was in exile in South Africa. And there was the Haitian people, particularly Haitian women, as well, supported with an international campaign, demanded his return. And I remember even President Obama was opposed to his return. But finally he was, I think that campaign allowed for his return, but it wasn't supported by much of the American left, wasn't supported by much of the international left. And certainly the international community was silent on this question. Of course, the international community was involved in the occupation of Haiti during that time. And during this occupation, the United States, France, and Canada were allowing or facilitating the assassination and even kidnapping of people who were part of the Haitian resistance. One of the men I met in 2007, Pierre Levinsky, was captured in 2007, in August of 2007. I remember him being kidnapped, and he hasn't been seen to this day. A man who had massive amount of support, a man who supported people who have been terrorized and victims of torture, or whose families have been incarcerated and forced into exile. Another question the international community has been silent on is the question of restitution from France. That again is being demanded by people on the ground, not necessarily the intellectuals or folks in government, but people on the ground are demanding this restitution be paid back to Haiti for the goal that was demanded by gunboat. And not only did the French coerce the Haitian people to pay them gold for their liberation because they had been freed, right? Mm-hmm. But the United States, when it occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934, ensured that Haitians would repay this money to France. So restitution is due to the Haitian people for this goal, and the international community, or the left or Pan-Africanists, because even on some of these questions, I think Black folk are even silent on, and we don't raise as important parts of our demands, just like we call for the end of apartheid and freedom for political prisoners in South Africa. It needs to be demanded by us today. And finally, I think, with all these corrupt governments that are supported by the United States and other imperial powers, people are challenging on the street. They challenge the false and fraudulent elections that have been taking place. They challenge all these things. They challenge continued repression and assassination of their leaders, things of that nature. They challenge things like, I remember after the earthquake, the Bush and the Clinton fund, they were raising so much money. The Red Cross raising so much money. But when I went there in 2010, I didn't see much evidence of that, resources being given to Haitian people on the ground. And there have been research to show that, folks were ripped off and the money was diverted different places. But, and not to mention the money that was ripped off that Venezuela contributed to the Haitian people, to Petrocruide, and other organs of the Venezuela Bolivarian Revolution, but it didn't meet the people. They're wondering what happened to the damn money, and so Haitian people are out on the streets disrupting things, making things ungovernable, and so I think. And at the same time, they're at the mercy of some of these so-called gangs, who are certainly supported by the elite in many cases. So I think the international community definitely needs to put a highlight on Haiti. Not to mention the fact, finally, I should say, that here in the United States today, we have people who have escaped that conflict, right? And who are seeking refuge here, but the United States government, whether it's Trump or Biden, has sent these folks back, being these dangerous conditions where there could be some retribution against them. So that we really need to speak up and highlight Haiti internationally, and that's why I'm so happy, my brother Bowie, that you're having this program today, because it's important to look at the past and the history and the culture, but we got to look at what's happening right now and see how we can be of aid and assistance to those who are in, we're still in the midst of the conflict right now.
Oh, Sister Bello, you have the last words to close this beautiful conversation, extraordinary conversation around of Haiti, about the Haiti revolution, Haiti independence, and you have the last opportunity to give us what's going on, or what's your vision, or what's the future. Hello, sister.
Yes.
Hello? Uh-huh.
I'd like to bring two things to attention. The first one is, yes, France demanded $21 billion from Haiti because they lost their slaves. So we must pay them, not them pay us for 312 years of hard work, but us pay them for not having us as captive, working for nothing for them anymore. And we did. Then the United States in 1914 came to Haiti and stole the entire gold reserve of the country. Till this day, it is kept in Fort Knox, Georgia, USA. No Haitian government can even open their mouth and mention this theft. Just to mention those two elements of state highway robbery from these so-called rulers and in Haiti, against Haiti. Now, what must be done? Of course, the first thing is, until you have rulers who know who they are, who understand the depth of their history, they cannot stand up and look at anybody in the face. So, as long as we have rulers who think Jesus, some white man, is it solves everything, once you call its name. Well, anybody who looks like Jesus, they will take him for Jesus, and they will never speak up for anything they have to speak up for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it is a must that each one of us work at being ourselves. And once you start working at being yourself is not just that little body here, but as I develop a better understanding of who I am and communicate with the sun, communicate with the rain, communicate with the leaves, then I see myself as part of the whole, as an element of the whole. But I also see myself, no matter how tiny I am, as being able to call on the protection and being aided by the whole. So that's why know yourself is so vital. And that is why, as our people, if we look at around the world, in the past year, every head of state, African head of state, who's taken position against the vaccine have been assassinated. None of us have spoken up. In fact, recently I was looking at a video of, I think it was the Zambia
Yes.
head of state, who was saying that he will not allow any vaccine to his people until their own people can test the
Tanzania.
vaccine. No, Tanzania.
Mhm.
And tested and know, etc., etc. Well, as soon as I heard him say that, I said, okay, here's another one that we're gonna hear. They're gonna at least try to
Go
kill
and
him.
sleep. Mhm.
Why can they kill our leaders when they want to defend us? Because if the leader has not worked on being self, and the self becomes the entire population when you work at being yourself, you're not just a single item.
Hmm.
So as you work on this, then you also work on our collective power.
Yes.
Being rich is not going to save you. Being a millionaire is not going to save you. But, and even in fact, we could say with somebody like Gaddafi, who did a lot for his people.
Mhm.
So he spread the fortune around, that ultimately did not save him either. We have to study and see what is missing, what was missing, what is it that he did not do that did not connect him enough to the population, even though they tried a long time before they could get him. But ultimately they did.
Yes.
So we have to work hard at building the center pole of our being and making it stronger every day. And we must be aware that you cannot fight your enemy with his weapons. Ultimately, you will lose.
Mhm.
You must create your own weapons. And your weapons are all over the universe. So you must identify them, recognize them, and practice them so that you will be able to do what you have to do to protect your people. Because ultimately, that's where we are being warred upon, even though we are not at war. But we are being warred upon everywhere, in the church, in the school, in the books, everywhere you turn, in the so called sciences, in the so called history, no matter what discipline you take, the war is
Instagram.
there. And if you're not aware of it, then you will not be able to use it in the
Mhm.
proper manner that will protect our people. We must protect the next 21 generations. We must have plans, strategies to defend our people in every way, shape, or form. If I take Haiti as an example, up until the 90s, early 90s, Haiti was totally self sufficient. We ate nothing, we didn't need anything coming from anywhere for us to eat. Today, more than 80% of the things we put in our mouth come from someplace else. And in a parallel way, when you study it, you'll find that when we ate everything that was produced at home, the health situation in Haiti was 100 times better than it is today when we're eating things coming from everywhere. Plastic rice from over here, whatever, poison something from over there. So all of that is part of the knowledge of self. Knowing, eating, drinking what you produce, it builds your strength. We cannot overlook that. It is a must. Because in this war, unless you are fully you, have your own strategies, your own tactics, you can use the thing, but use it your way. So I invite each and every one of us to work at becoming your own self more and more each day. That's the only way to build our collective power. As this is the beginning of the year, I wish you all health, which is under attack, wealth. All of our countries are being, our wealth is being stolen by others, whether it's the iridium, the petrol, whatever you have, wherever you have. All of the countries that they have labeled poor countries are very rich countries. And certainly Haiti is one of the richest countries in the Americas. But once they put in your head that you are poor, then when you see them going out with bags and boxes, you don't fight. You don't even ask, what do you have here? Because you know you have nothing. That's how this battle is carried out. They put it in your head first through your so-called intellectuals who recite all the Jesus stuff, all the so-called science stuff, and make us stupid. So wake up, our people. Follow Bookman Duty's way. Listen to the divine in you and raise yourself to your best self. And so we will have our most powerful collective self yet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, my sister. Muchas gracias, Abuekiba. We are finished this magnificent conversation. Everybody has the cover of the book of the two books we was presented today. The book of Dr. Ingel, the book of Dr. Bello. They have two books that everybody has this book in the cover and in the platforms. They will see how they can link with this book and read about what we're talking about. And I want to thank all the people who help us to produce this program: Uhuru Africa Television, Malcolm Garvey University, Pan-African Movement in Spain, the GAC, Global African Congress in London, in Spain, and Fundación Vida, Grupo Ecológico Verde, and the groups of the African descendant in Spain to support this event, and the Guinea Equatorial Women Association in Madrid. We want to thank them because they was the people who really support us to produce this. I want to say only one last thing, that in the process where we was producing this show, I was seeing the films of Chaka Zulu. And Chaka Zulu was in the conversation with Ceswayo, was defected. And then he went to England to tell the king, the Queen of England, given his kingdom. And after that, the Queen of England said, I cannot give you, because the spirit of Zulu, Chaka Zulu, is in your people. And he will back again. So that's why the sister was talking about. I don't know, the Queen of England told Ceswayo that I cannot give you your kingdom because you rule the country, but the spirit of the people you are ruling is not on you. It's on Chaka Zulu. And then when Chaka Zulu asked the English, who is other powerful kingdom like me? And the soldier, the British soldier, tell him that he's in a country that is black people, they became rebels against everybody. And so Chaka said, call me these people, send in letters, write in your language, tell him that I want to see them. I was talking to Haiti. It was very interesting conversation between these soldiers and Chaka, because Chaka said, what is people like me in the war? And the English said, there is some groups of people in Iceland, it's all in Iceland and Santo Domingue. And Chaka said, okay, I want to see these people. So that is the last thing I want to say in this beautiful conversation. Thank you, Brother Akindele, Professor Akindele, who is member of the NAPO, New African People Organization, Malcolm S. Garvey's movement, and professor of Georgia State University, and one of the guy who long time was travel, talking about Haiti and many other places. And we want to thank you to be here with us through Spain, through Haiti, from US and Africa. So I think so. I'm very happy to get you in this in this program today. And the same thing with Dr. Bagina Bello. She's historian, active Pan-African activist. She founded Fundación Felicité. She's activist with the foundation, and she's professor at the Haiti State University. She's author of the book that you have in your in your platform right now, and she's working now another beautiful, interesting book. Maybe the next time you will tell us about this beautiful, interesting book you are doing. So we will keep in contact with this program. And maave amina mbolo biake yang di mana ba jambi fa wo na Betty a jame Haiti akinjele ba Dr. Bello ba ke yang ba mana bia lep ba mana bia ko ba van mamote mangalot avalang banga bo tofili Haiti ya Africa ngum Bookman Duty ya fa François Macendal ya fa Fatima ya fa abimbor banga zuba so bo Dessalines ba mana bia kat mi abesi semi yemen de jambe yenabo agwe kiba tofili alumanda chinosu in fan language means the struggle continues. Okay, alumanda chinosu struggle continues. Alumanda chinosu struggle continues. That is in fan language. Alumanda chinosu struggle continues. Abuyakiba, thank you very much. Uhuru, I want to thank brother Tony, who is in the technical in Barcelona, and brother Tony, he was the guy who was in technical today, and everybody who was following this program, especially the student of the Malcolm Garvey University. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias, Abuekiba. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Free the land, free Haiti.
Yeah, Uhuru Kwataifa.
Kwataifa. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm gonna jump off because I came on here right after class. I've been going.
You still have this temple in your garden?
Actually, I got another space. It's inside now. Yeah, I have it inside space. Since you've been here, I built a space in the back.
Okay, and Sister Bello, when you want to come to Spain, we was waiting women like you here to give us fire. We need fire, African fire women.
We'll see.
Yes, we need this kind of this kind of voodoo devils. Okay.
Right on. They there already.
Okay. Okay, Akinjali.
All right, free the land. I'm gonna jump off because I got people calling me and stuff too.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay,
right,
take care. Give me greetings to Aminata, Tasia, all these people.
Most definitely. I'll tell them I talked to you today.
Okay.
I'm telling them you're gonna have them on one of these.